Yo, salute. We all the way live. This is the one and only, the legendary helper, whistleblower, tester, all around rabble rouser, I suppose. But hey, it's for the sake of trying to gain knowledge and help folks out there. Now this one is being done in conjunction with Hip Hop Legal. And what we are talking about is this notion of organized harassment. I've mentioned it. You see it in my bio. There's a case to refer to. Case number 423CV01013, USDC, Southern District of Texas, Houston Division. That lays out the basis of what organized harassment encompasses. Now, based off of a theory that we had, we just felt that with the amount of technology that's out there that's available and at the disposal of law enforcement, that there could be certain ways in which laws and processes, if you will, I'm not sure which term is correct, anyway, would be circumvented or downright violated, pushed aside for the sake of using this apparatus that again is listed in case number 423CV01013, USDC, Southern District of Texas, Houston Division. This idea of organized harassment is being used by law enforcement or pseudo law enforcement groups for the sake of harassing Americans. Now, one of our theories was that, hey, maybe these folks are watching and looking from the sky. Now, and again, I'll do a response, a reaction video to something that I noticed recently. It was a video in which, that pointed out, it was a video in which an individual, or rather individuals, young black males, were being pursued from the sky based off of intel or evidence that was provided from the ground. Now, to randomly use, for example, drone or helicopters to follow an individual around, it's one of those gray areas, I would imagine, or rather, in my opinion, as it relates to due process and what is necessary to sort of classify someone that needs a certain amount of surveillance, right? There are ways to get, bear with me there, as you can hear the exhaust, the loud noises. These things are happening as I'm trying to talk. And these are all the organized harassers down here in South Florida. It's really fascinating. But what we thought was that they were watching from the sky. And so if you watch from the sky the same way that you watch from the ground, you'd have to get a judge to sign off. Usually that's the case. But I think that being that this technology and sort of ability to use these things are readily available, what it does is create a scenario in which if the tools are accessible and they're in your hands, then why not use them? And then sort of look the other way as far as providing that intel to another agency or party or group and letting them know, sort of helping them to fill out the gaps, the missing gaps. You help them fill out the gaps, and everyone else is none the wiser, at least as it relates to what rights were violated for the gaps to be filled in. So, in other words, if we were following this individual to go into X location, how did we know what they were wearing? How did we know what vehicle they were in? And how do we pass that information on to entities on the ground as it relates to what is taking place? Well, how? We alerted our air unit, our aviation department, if you will, to get in contact with these folks, and what they did, or rather, to begin a certain amount of surveillance. Now, again, without a judge's order approving so, but that surveillance that they gathered helped us to ascertain the location, and what the subjects were wearing, so on and so forth, right? Now this is all hypothetical, but and this is what I thought initially. And again, I said I saw a video that points out that this is what's happening. So I'll do a reaction to that over on Hip Hop Legal. Check out Hip Hop Legal on all platforms. And we got the Bright Line train passing by once again, so bear with me there. All right, it's a pretty short train. But the amount of surveillance that takes place happens from the sky, and that evidence, that information is passed on to entities on the ground. They sort of communicate and then begin to coalesce, to convene and start to hone in on an area in which a quote-unquote target might be located. Now, what you might find interesting is that there are various mechanisms. You talk about forms of technology that are being used. There are many different things out here that are at the disposal of law enforcement to harass and to sort of create an uncomfortable scenario for the quote-unquote target. Now, one example is via lights. There are devices called LoRa as well as NEMA, if I remember correctly. But these devices are used to essentially control how the lights are changed. So a light that is green will turn red, and what it does is sort of slow down or impede the progress of the individual to a point where you can have the other parties that are on the ground again, the law enforcement, undercover or community watch, what have you, to pull up on that individual and then begin to commence their tactics of making that person feel uncomfortable. So you got everything from driving real close to the vehicle, flashing lights, different little, clown, squirmy, what's the word I'm looking for? Like little tactics that a child would use, but these are adults using it again to try to make that person feel uncomfortable. So the lights begin to start to change, obviously, and then you got these cars that start pulling up next to you, right? All over. Then it becomes a scenario, and there's another thing they do. Oftentimes they won't pull up directly next to you. What they do is give you a certain amount of space, and it wouldn't make most folks feel uncomfortable if you wouldn't know what was happening. If you know what's happening, it almost becomes like a simulation. And so it's with that we began to approach this whole issue that's happening. And again, it's the circumventing of the Constitution for the sake of rapidly deploying forces to induce and create a scenario that could have potentially been, it could play out any sort of way, because there have been instances where folks haven't dealt with these things in a manner in which they sort of are relaxed and not bothered by it, and then these individuals respond negatively. Now, that's the most caustic aspect of all of this that I would point out. But anyway, we had a theory, so we decided, let's test out the theory. And one of the first ways we decided to do so was by creating a company, Drone Watch TV, that not only we want to sort of have our stake and have an impact on the drone aviation footage industry, but we also wanted to see if we could test some things out in the field, so to speak. So we posted the Drone Watch logo, as well as a banner on top of the vehicle, over to the sides of the vehicle as well. And what we've been doing for the past couple of months is driving throughout the city, all of South Florida, quite frankly, to test out this hypothesis. And sure enough, it's come to a head at this point. If it's not obvious, then, I suppose I'd have to capture it from the ground, and that will be coming soon, because we've also created point of view films. So there's a way to capture it from my point of view, so that I won't be perceived as nutso or crazy. But that's another aspect, and that's another aspect of organized harassment, and another conversation for another time. But in the interim, it's clear that once we begin to start driving, these folks are communicating on the ground with one another, and at some level, the skies are involved. They're watching, and they are then sort of watching, as opposed to using. And the idea was, let's do this to see if there could be some sort of good in it. And the truth of it is, we still feel that there is a way to sort of turn this into a good thing, because imagine if you can use this technology to stop folks from being kidnapped, to stop women from being raped, R-word, to stop all kinds of negative things, right? But no, they clearly haven't done that. I mean, and if they have, then that would essentially mean that crime, as we know it, has ended. And I don't know if we're at that precipice down here in South Florida, but I've gone through several areas, and I got to tell you, I've felt this is the safest I've felt in the longest time. But for some reason, the media just continues to report on these incidents that oftentimes appear to be either made up or staged. I can't call it, but if they have a hand in this, then this is even as deplorable as you could imagine. But anyway, we're on the ground here, and all I can do is speak to our first-hand experiences. But we drive around, and we don't notice crime being as prevalent, because if you have these mechanisms, these forms of technology at your disposal, then clearly you can use them in various ways. And as you can hear right there, there's the exhaust vehicles coming to make loud noises to try to stop this message from being put out there, but they won't be effective. There's also the horn component, in which, depending on what area you go to, individuals start to honk their horns almost as a means of trying to distract you or trying to bother you, or alerting other individuals as to what is taking place, or as to how they should sort of get into place and begin to help to put things into motion. So that's what's happening. But again, we pointed out, we had an idea, a theory, based off of our hypothesis. We decided to test it out. And so again, we're here at this point now where it's a clear point that there's forms of technology that are being used by the militarization or militarized aspects of law enforcement that circumvent constitutional rights for the sake of simply harassment. And that's all it is. We've captured it. And again, I can't tell you how many individuals that are either complicit or have decided to look in the other direction. But no matter how you slice it, this is something that is happening and is clearly illegal. And so, we're going to continue to capture it to the best that we can. This is our first time going live officially. We'll put it on the books. We'll go live more often. And, I hope wherever you're at, you're being safe. I don't know if this is being done all across the United States, but again, this isn't China. And some of these things have not sort of passed the legal test, so to speak, in terms of whether it should be allowed. Now, again, what happens, as with most things in life, when you give it to people are fallible. They'll take that rope and give themselves enough space to hang themselves with. Unfortunately, though, that's not being reported and that's not being acknowledged. And so we're acknowledging it, and we hope that at some point it begins to get acknowledged across the board, across the United States. And if it's happening in your city, God bless you. Don't be too weirded out, because maybe this is just the new normal, so to speak. But I can't imagine that the Constitution still exists. So what we're gathering here is pretty solid intel. But the final thing I want to say is that we've been proven right. Our theory is correct, that there are elements of law enforcement that use the mechanisms within case number 423 CV 01013, USDC, Southern District of Texas, Houston Division. They use this apparatus within that document, or rather lawsuit. You'll see they are the defendants for the most part. There are various layers to these defendants. What they're using are these tools, and strictly for the sake of harassment, to try to induce a la re-engineer incidents in our society. Now, what does that mean in terms of past incidents? I'll leave that up to you to try to put that together. But, you know, they talk about the term conspiracy theory and all these things, knowing that it was something that was used to sort of shut the mouths and to discredit folks in the past. We won't even get into that. All we'll do is just present the scenarios as they are, present our theories, test them, and then depending on what we find, we'll present that as well. So, just want to tell you, thank you for checking this out. This is, once again, the legendary helper. Just here to help. I love you. Peace.